It's no surprise that the highest scoring fantasy players come from the highest scoring NFL offenses. Well, we're here to talk to you about 7 offenses that have got sneaky upside that could be fantasy dynamite that are currently underrated. We're the Fantasy Sanctuary and we're here to dive into those offenses right now. The first one, the LA Chargers. Justin Herbert had rib issues all last year, wasn't healthy from about week 3 on. He is now fully healthy. They've got wide receivers. Keenan Allen missed time. Mike Williams missed time. They've added Quinton Johnson. And they've brought in a brand new offensive coordinator. Tom, are the Chargers ready for liftoff?
Absolutely, and I think the Chargers are going to be one of those teams that a year from now we look back at it and it's like, how did we let those players ADP get to where they are? Because it was so obvious the issues that they dealt with in 2022. Like you mentioned, Justin Herbert's rib injury, like he couldn't throw the ball downfield. He really struggled with that. And that combined with tepid play calling from the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, it really it did the offense no favors whatsoever. Herbert hit a career low of 6.4 yards per attempt. Now we've got Kellen Moore coming over from the Cowboys, who the rumor is that it was a mutual agreement. He wanted to leave. Mike McCarthy wanted to take over play calling because he wanted to run the ball more. Kellen Moore wanted to pick up the pace and pass the ball more. And that is fantasy gold. You go back to last season, and as well as all the issues for Justin Herbert, it was Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. It was week 14 before Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both played a full game together. And at that point, from week 14 onwards, Justin Herbert's yards per attempt jumped from 6.4 up to 7.4, which would bring him about to league average. So even that would have been a lot better for fantasy purposes. You look at what Kellen Moore did with the Cowboys. Dak Prescott's yards per attempt was always over 8 every season. He pushed the ball downfield. And you go back again to the Cowboys and look at what Kellen Moore did there. They always played fast, and I love talking about teams playing fast when it comes to fantasy because that's where the points are. More pace, more plays, more points, just time and time again. And I'll draft as many of the Chargers as I can this year.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about Austin Eckler. I've got some concerns about whether he repeats as that kind of, top 3 running back. Obviously, he was RB1 last year. I am so in on this passing game, though. I think Justin Herbert, the issue he has had last 2 years is that there's not been that encouragement to push the ball downfield. He's almost operating too perfect as a quarterback, and he's getting through his reads and checking down, and he almost needs someone to just say, you know what, it's okay to take some chances every now and then. You don't have to be perfect. And we've seen Mike Williams. He had a 6-game stretch where he was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy. We've seen Keenan Allen put in those back-end wide receiver 1 seasons year after year after year. If those two can stay healthy and Justin Herbert pushes the ball downfield a little bit more, this offense could blow up. And that Herbert, Allen, Mike Williams stack, that could be winning people fantasy titles for a long time to come. Diving back into Kellen Moore, are you a little bit concerned that we're almost overhyping him a little bit and there's a little bit almost too much expectation of what he could bring to this Chargers offense?
Perhaps I'm getting, just a smidge carried away with it. But it's like, you look back at when he was with the Cowboys, they were top 2 in plays per game in both 2020 and 2021. It just seemed like he's got that kind of like slightly analytical minded approach, much like Brandon Staley, the Chargers head coach. And I think with the two of them, they are going to know when it's appropriate to run, but they're also going to know when it's effective to go, all right, well, now we've established a run, we can lean into play action and we can get Justin Herbert taking some of those absolute moonshots all the way down the field. And yeah, I think this is going to be a lot more ambitious as an offense, and that is really going to open things up.
Absolutely. Another offense that's got a new offensive coordinator, the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to talk about the offensive coordinator in a minute, Tom. But this skill group, is this the best skill group that the Ravens have ever had in their history?
I think it is. And you go back to when the Ravens first came about, like you're talking about, they're not one of these teams who've been around for 100 years. They've only been around for just over a couple of decades. You go back to when Lamar Jackson was unanimous MVP in 2019. After Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown, the target leaders were Willie Snead, Nick Boyle, Hayden Hurst, Seth Roberts. You fast forward a year after that, and once you remove Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, it was Willie Snead and Devin Duvernay. 2021, they brought in Rashad Bateman. That was the year where it was like it really could have been something special if it wasn't for Bateman getting injured during training camp, and then Lamar getting injured later on. We never really got to see what this vision of the Ravens passing game could be if they had two good wide receivers as well as Mark Andrews. So, and then after that, Marquise Brown left because he was dissatisfied with the way that Greg Roman ran his game, which is completely fair. But now this feels like the first opportunity to see, okay, Lamar says he wants to pass more. Lamar says that he wants to be that sort of passing quarterback and really have control of the line of scrimmage. Well, Todd Monken's given it to him. And with Odell Beckham, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, if they're all healthy and they can all stay healthy, I really believe this could be a truly special season for them.
Yeah, I'm so excited, not just about the collection of players, but the way they all fit together. It is absolutely perfect. You know, you could almost say it's prototypical. You've got your big-bodied X outside in Rashad Bateman. You've got your Z in Odell Beckham. You've got Zay Flowers, who's going to be a movable slot guy. You've even got Nelson Aguilar, who you can throw in. And yes, he's got plenty of warts, but as a deep threat that can take the top off a defense, he's going to be great. You've then got Mark Andrews, who's going to be your target hog. You've got that nice 1-2 punch in the backfield. The weapons are there for this offense to take a step forward. And then that brings us to the offensive coordinator, Tom Monken. He's just come off being an inventive, fast-paced play caller with the national title in Georgia. Do you think that he's going to bring that to the NFL and get back to, you know, the Ravens being a slightly more prototypical offense rather than the run-heavy, Lamar-centric offense that we've seen in the last few years with Greg Roman?
Absolutely, and I think when you look at Todd Monken's career, whether it's in the NFL with the Browns, with the Bucs, or whether you're talking about his college career, what he does well is he makes use of the weapons available to him incredibly well. You know, he's talking about how he wants to get more involvement from running backs in the screen game. That's something the Ravens have never managed to do. I think that's going to unlock J.K. Dobbins' ceiling to a level that we've not seen before. And yes, running quarterbacks do not check down at a high rate. And I wouldn't expect Lamar to suddenly target J.K. Dobbins 80 times in a season. But if we can get 50 targets for J.K. Dobbins in a season, then that's really going to help because we know he can be efficient on the ground. We're going to see, you know, Zay Flowers on screen games. We're going to see two tight end looks where you've got Isaiah Likely be the featured option. We're going to see Odell Beckham in the red zone be the kind of wide receiver that Lamar's not had since Marquise Brown was there. And when Marquise Brown was there, he really did lean on him in the red zone. It's something that was underappreciated about him. So, yeah, I think Todd Monken's absolutely going to unlock it. When John Harbaugh hired him, he talked immediately after about how it was important to hear about offensive coordinators who wanted to play fast, who wanted to do no huddle. Greg Roman was famed for letting the clock wind down. Even when the Ravens were losing, they'd get to the line of scrimmage and it'd take forever to get the plays called. Last year, the Ravens were third in the most delay of games. So this is going to be a really different team. They are going to run the ball, and there's definitely going to be times where they run the ball and lean on that in games. But there's also going to be games where they just absolutely light it up in the passing game.
Absolutely. If you're here, do you disagree with our takes on these offenses? Do you not think they're going to be as good? Let us know in the comments below. Whilst you're there, hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe. There's going to be plenty more videos coming over the next days, weeks, months. We are going to get you ready for the fantasy season as it kicks off. The next offense, Atlanta Falcons. We've seen add another elite weapon in Bijan Robinson. This is one of the slowest paced, run-heavy offenses at times last year, but they're starting to collect some weapons. The offensive line is good. Arthur Smith is a inventive play caller that could utilize all of these unique weapons in different places all over the field. Do you think that there's fantasy gold to be had in Atlanta at the moment?
I do, and I think a big part of it becomes from the fact that, you know, we have to look at what this team can be doing at its absolute ceiling. And you look at Kyle Pitts, you look at Drake London, you look at Bijan Robinson, you even look at Tyler Algier. Like, these are incredible talents. Even Jonnu Smith, who's somebody who's kind of fallen out of favor. But if Jonnu Smith gets back into the kind of way that he was being used by Arthur Smith when he was in Tennessee, then that can help unlock him and he can be a better option. This team did play slowly last year under Marcus Mariota, but when Desmond Ridder got into the starting lineup, they played quicker. It seemed like Arthur Smith realised the error of his ways with Marcus Mariota. Like, they came out at the start of the season and they were playing not super fast, but they were playing with, I think it was 26 pass attempts per game over the first 3 or 4 games. And in that period, that's when Drake London was wide receiver 14. Then Arthur Smith sort of started to coach more conservatively, and the attempts per game dropped down to 22. And we didn't see any more from Drake London until the back end of the season when he was back to averaging over 13 PPR points. That was in the games with Desmond Ridder. I do think there's a huge spectrum of outcomes for Desmond Ridder. It's easy to say, okay, well, yeah, he was better than Marcus Mariota because Marcus Mariota was very uninspiring. But Desmond Ridder, of quarterbacks with 100 dropbacks, he was number one in off-target throw percentage at 27.8%. Mariota was at 20.7, so it wasn't even as low, and he was the 7th worst. Desmond Ridder, in terms of completions over expected, he was the NFL worst at minus 6.5. But we see time and time again that quarterbacks come into their second year and they make a leap forward. It's not unprecedented. We're going to be going into an off-season where this year, there is no question, it's not Taylor Heineke, the backup, who's going to be taking snaps off him unless things go really bad. During training camp, it's all going to be tailored to Desmond Ridder. And with the weapons he's got, and with the offensive line, which they've made upgrades at, I find it hard not to expect a bit of a jump from him. And if he makes a bit of a jump, then Kyle Pitts, Drake London absolutely could be huge fantasy superstars.
Yeah, it's absolutely, with those weapons, it's the island of misfit toys as well. This is Arthur Smith is the only offensive coach that I am confident is going to be able to get the most out of those weapons by using them in inventive ways. You know, we're going to see Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Cordero Patterson, Johnny Smith, all lined up all over the field in ridiculous formations, but it's going to get defenses thinking and they're not going to know how to react. And that's going to create big plays. That's going to create opportunities for these guys to put up fancy points. You talked about Desmond Ridder taking the step as year 2. Another offense that's got a quarterback that we're expecting that leap from is the Pittsburgh Steelers. A lot of people seem very low on Kenny Pickett, Tom. Do you think he can take that step and bring the Steelers' skill position players into fantasy relevancy?
Absolutely, and the Steelers are another team who they got it wrong with how they approached the quarterback position last year. Playing Mitch Trubisky last year was pointless. Mitch Trubisky was never going to start the entire season. It just seems strange that rather than start Kenny Pickett from the start of the season, they kept going with Trubisky, and then eventually when they put Kenny Pickett in, he faced a really tough run of games, far tougher than if he'd been at the start of the season. And he went on to only throw a total of 6 passing touchdowns across 12 games, never managed more than 1 in a single game. That touchdown rate was 1.7%, which going back to the year 2000, it was 660th out of 679 quarterbacks. So it's like that feels way below where it's going to be. I'm very confident that he's going to take a jump forward. I think that he can double that and get a lot closer to the NFL average of 4.53. And I'm expecting, close to 20 touchdowns, if not above it. And again, yeah, we see these quarterbacks take the second-year leap. The offensive line has improved. I think I was looking at PFF earlier, and they have the Steelers' offensive line projected to be the 12th best. That'd be a huge improvement on last year. It'd give Kenny Pickett a lot more time. It'd allow the run game to get going in a way that it didn't last year. And you look at the weapons that Kenny Pickett's got. Deontay Johnson, who we know is a volume hog, somebody who can flash big at times. We're big fans of him. Pat Freiermuth, who's a very reliable tight end. He might not have the ceiling of like Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, but he's absolutely a reliable pass catcher. George Pickens, who can make those big plays on the boundary. And then the run game, I'm not super high on Najee Harris, but I think the tag team approach of him and Jaylen Warren is absolutely one of the best running back rooms that they could ask for.
Yeah, I think that we're talking about Kenny Pickett making the leap. And I think if you go and put on the tape and watch the second half of last year, I think he's already made that leap. I think he was far more impressive down the stretch, those final 6 games, than I think people realised. And I'm really excited about what he could be moving forward, because this offense has got weapons. It's littered all across those skill positions. And I think that there are potential players that are going to allow him to take that next step forward. And the offense will take that step forward and become true fantasy stars. We've already seen some flashes. I think it'll be far more consistent. Another offense that we've seen flashes, there's some potentially interesting weapons. There's also some serious questions about weapons. The New York Giants, under second year under Brian Dable, Daniel Jones was a star last year, shall we say, for fantasy purposes. I don't think many people saw it coming. Do you think that he can continue to improve and bring more kind of fantasy production out of those skill position players heading into year two?
I do, and it's like you look at what the final point on this chart we got on screen. Daniel Jones is less working against him than ever before. Last year he didn't have the weapons. You go back before that, and he was dealing with people like Jason Garrett and Joe Judge, who just, they weren't fantastic. They didn't get the best out of him. They didn't seem to be coaching him to his optimum. But Brian Dable seems to be really doing it. He got Daniel Jones' turnover rate completely down. Daniel Jones seemed better at his decision making than perhaps at any other point in his career. And I'm not sure if Daniel Jones is going to rush for sort of, 700 yards or so like he did last season. But I think he can be way more productive in the passing game to make up for that. Last year, they went from, before Brian Dable was there, they had the league's worst red zone success rate at 44%. Last year, that jumped to 60%, which was the fifth best in the league. They've got all these options who can, I feel like they can take another jump forward with that simply because now they've got better options at wide receiver because you bring in someone like Darren Waller. They brought in all these other slot receivers and small-bodied guys. But Darren Waller's that inside-outside tight end who can play on the boundary, he can play at the seam, he can play all over the place. He's been a good red zone weapon for Derek Carr over the last few years. So I think he's going to be great. I mean, he's averaged 7.5 targets per game over the last 4 years, and even in a subdued last year, he had 5 targets per game with the Raiders. So I think he's going to be huge for Daniel Jones. I think Saquon Barkley, it was disappointing to not see the Giants and him come to terms on a long-term deal. But that just means that Saquon Barkley is again in a contract year. He needs to go out and put it all on film so that teams will want to pay him next year. It's an uphill struggle for him, but he can do it. He can go out. He can have a career year, I think. Outside of that, the wide receivers, it gets pretty muddy. I don't mind taking shots on Isaiah Hodgins. We saw him have a really good finish to last year after he was claimed. I think it was off waivers for the Giants. And then outside of that, Darius Slayton, I'm kind of interested in a little. Jalen Hyatt is an interesting rookie, but didn't really run a lot of different routes whilst he was in college. So it's kind of hard to project him for a huge role. Down the stretch, stranger things have happened. And of course, Wan'Dale Robinson should be back and healthy at some point.
Yeah, I feel like this is an offense of two parts. I think the primary options, Daniel Jones, Darren Waller, Saquon Barkley, I really like for fantasy purposes. And I think that this offense can be good enough to sustain all three. The secondary options, I don't want any part of them for fantasy. But in terms of NFL play, they are competent NFL starting caliber players. Whether that be Jamison Crowder, Sterling Shepard, hopefully Jalen Hyatt comes in and produces. But those are guys that are competent and they will allow the other players to get fantasy production. Daniel Jones isn't going to be thrown to scrubs off the street. He's now got NFL caliber wide receivers, which can allow him to take that step in the passing game. Another offense that basically we're saying it can't be worse than last year, the New England Patriots. We've seen Matt Patricia's gone. They've suddenly realized that actually having an offensive play caller that's called offensive plays before might be useful. They've brought Bill O'Brien back. Mac Jones hopefully can get back to rookie Mac Jones rather than what we saw last year. They've re-signed Devontae Parker. They've added Juju Smith-Schuster. Do you think that just that change in play caller is going to be enough to truly unlock this Patriots offense?
I do, and it seems important that, Mac Jones and Bill O'Brien have a relationship that dates back before the time with the Patriots, because we saw Mac Jones was, a passionate, spiky player at times last year, and he wasn't happy with the setup that was there. And, it's not, it doesn't seem too crazy to say that Bill Belichick failed Mac Jones last year. He didn't provide him with weapons. He didn't provide him with the offense that he needed. And the team suffered because of it. They were 27th in Football Outsiders weighted DVOA on offense last year, which was a step back from 5th the year before when it was Mac Jones' rookie season. So I don't think Mac Jones can ever be your kind of QB1 on a fantasy team. but I think he can be your QB2 on a Superflex team quite happily. I think that the problem that this team had last year was they weren't able to sustain drives. They were bottom 5 in first downs last year. If you're not staying on the field, if you're not picking up first downs, then it's rather hard for your fantasy options to actually score you any points. When Bill O'Brien was the Houston head coach, they were a top half team in total first downs per season for like the last 3 years that he was there. It was somebody who consistently kept the offense on the field, even when there were issues. And it helps teams be more fantasy relevant for us. Mike Gesicki, Juju Smith-Schuster, they're definite upgrades on what we had there. We saw Jonnu Smith never seemed to get going in New England. Hunter Henry is a fine tight end, but Mike Gesicki is just that pure pass catching player who could be moved around, played out of the slot. Juju, we've seen him be played out of the slot plenty. And that feels like something that Mac Jones needs. And then, we're getting through all this without talking about Ramondre Stevenson, who last year absolutely outperformed his ADP. Now, there's no Damian Harris there. There's only Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris, kind of special teams players who have no worries about whatsoever. Ramondre Stevenson can absolutely be the RB1 overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to preach to me about Ramondre Stevenson. I'm all in. He's a true 3-down workhorse role that nobody seems to want to admit is a true 3-down workhorse hiding in plain sight. I think he is an absolute steal at his current price, his current ADP, and he's a guy that I think can carry you to a fantasy title. Whilst you're here, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. You know that we've got more stuff coming, and we're going to get you ready to win some titles this season.